Welcome to SMB Ask Us Anything, the structure where we try and answer your questions about faith and life. This week's question is fantastic. It's Holy Week, Good Friday and Easter and all of that. So what evidence do we actually have that Jesus lived, that he died, and he was resurrected? This is a huge topic, so I'm going to try and tackle it in 5 minutes. So in order to do that, I can't be as comprehensive as I would like to. I would encourage you, if you want a deeper read into this, to read an article by a guy named Joshua Swamidass. It's really well written. He comes from a scientific perspective. Okay, so trying to tackle this in 5 minutes, looking at Jesus. Did Jesus exist in the first place? We have no archaeological evidence that he did. Okay, 99.9% of people who lived back in Jesus' day wouldn't have left an archaeological footprint, especially a peasant living in an insignificant country like Israel. Okay, so that's not evidence that Jesus didn't exist. So how do we claim that he did? Documentational evidence. So outside of the Bible, there is tons of documentational evidence of a person named Jesus or Jesus or Yeshua, okay, who lived during the time of Jesus, who was killed under the hands of Pontius Pilate, being strapped onto a cross, like crucified, and who was claimed to have been resurrected and started the movement of Christianity. Okay, all of those people who I put a little bit earlier, none of them are Christian writers. All of them are historians of the time who don't have a Christian bias. So any person who has a look at that historical accuracy would not debate the existence of Jesus in the first place. Okay, so moving on now, having a look at his death. Did Jesus die? Yes, they spoke about it in that historical evidence and in that documentational evidence that I listed before. Then the resurrection. How do we believe that Jesus was resurrected? And this is where it becomes a little bit more difficult, because when we look at evidence, it needs to be reproducible, and that's impossible when it comes to the light of the resurrection 2,000 odd years ago. So I'm going to be speaking from a perspective of faith, me being a Christian and believing in Jesus. Why do I believe in the resurrection? And the first point being the spreading of Christianity. No other movement in recorded history has reached so far across national, ethnical, religious, linguistic, cultural, political, and geographical borders. Okay, Christianity spread across the globe, and it's had a massive impact on us, especially here in the West, our idea of morality and our idea of how we live our lives. Okay, it's impacted each and every single one of us, either directly or indirectly. And something that's amazing about that is that it started in a very humble, insignificant place in Israel through a person who was a peasant. Okay, the early Christians also faced tremendous persecution, and that's not just recorded in the Bible, that's recorded in those sources that I listed earlier. A lot of them speak about the persecution of Christians under Nero and how all of the Roman Empire was trying to stop and quench this movement. Okay, so it persevered in the light of that. Another one, Blaise Pascal, speaks about the sheer number of prophecies regarding Jesus' life, death, and resurrections, factors beyond his control that were fulfilled in the person of Jesus. All of these can be dated to pre-Jesus' life. So these are prophecies ranging hundreds of years that speak about factors beyond Jesus' control that he's fulfilled, and no other person in history has been able to do that. Okay, third is the nature of his death, the fact that he did die. He wasn't just on the cross and kind of like walked off. He died. We have historical evidence that Jesus died. Okay, so having a look at it, we know he lived, he died. What about the resurrection? When it comes to the resurrection, we have more than 66,000 bits of early manuscripts that speak about the nature of Jesus' death and the nature of his resurrection. Okay, some of these predate Jesus, and with those early tests, there's incredible reliability that we find in them, that while there's variation, none of them contradict the New Testament tale about Jesus' resurrection from the dead. Okay, then there's also the nature of testimony. Within that time, the first people to basically testify about Jesus' resurrection were women whose voices weren't respected in society and nobody listened to in the first place, and the Roman guards who would have been killed because they allowed Jesus to escape or be resurrected. And then there was fishermen and people who were seen as lower tier within society. There's this vulnerability that comes out of that. The testimony is not about them, it's the testimony about Jesus and his resurrection. If we had to choose people to tell our story, these wouldn't have been the people that we would have chosen. Okay, and there's a certain element of truth that comes out through that. Then another point is the fact that Jesus' followers fled after his death, but there was one event that unified them and mobilized them and spread them. Okay, and they testified that as being the resurrection of Jesus, encountering him on the road to Emmaus, and being mobilized and sent out in the Great Commission, and to the point that every single one of his close disciples, apart from Judas, was martyred. They were killed for their faith. Okay, they were killed for proclaiming Jesus' resurrection. And if they didn't really believe it, then they would have denied that to save their lives. Okay, they weren't getting money from us. And then the last one is that people are still encountering Jesus today. Lives are being transformed by an encounter of the Holy Spirit that is done through the power of Jesus' resurrection and the movement of the Holy Spirit. It's not just random people anywhere. It's people all over the world throughout history have encountered Jesus and have been transformed by the movement of his Holy Spirit. Some of the greatest minds that we have known have encountered this Jesus and proclaimed his resurrection. So I know that this doesn't massively provide evidence, but for me, this is enough for me to believe that Jesus is who he says that he is. And I also believe within my heart and within my life that I've encountered Jesus and been changed by it, if you've heard my story. So I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, please do send them through to us, and hope to see you soon.